Welcome everybody to Monday Night Reading. Monday Night Reading is a tradition now here in the top three book workshop and top three books community. It started because I wanted nonfiction authors to have a chance to do a reading when their book came out. And it's just not a typical thing. Some people get to do them, but not a lot. And it's usually reserved for certain kinds of books. So we created Monday Night Reading. We used to do them the first Monday of the month, but guess what? We have so many authors publishing these days that we have to keep doing them. We can't just do them on one Monday of the month. Tonight, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Ida Rose Florez, Dr. Ida Rose Florez, and her groundbreaking, blow your mind, paradigm shifting, change the world book, The End of Education as We Know It, Regenerative Learning for Complex Times. And oh my gosh, could it have come at come on.
Timing is quite interesting.
Talk about complex times. I want to tell you that I don't think about education the same way having worked on this book. And I still think about it. And I remember talking to my mom about it, Ida Rose, when I was visiting her in the nursing home. And she said, well, I would like that one. Can I have a copy of that one? So I've ordered one from my mom, because it's the kind of book that makes you look at everything differently, everything in a whole new way, and beautifully, gorgeously written. So I'm thrilled to have you here, Ida Rose.
Thank you so much.
Before we do that, we've got your Laura introduction, which is also tradition. So Laura Stone, our Dean of Students, take it away.
I would love to. First, Ida Rose, your book has brought me to tears more than once. Everybody in Writing Sprints can attest. My son came by just a few minutes before we began. He's in school to become an educator, and I told him he needed to have his copy, so I bought him a copy as well. Just letting you know, we are trying to spread the word. To everyone else, buckle in because this is a heck of a CV. Dr. Ida Rose Florez is an influential thought leader who foresaw Western education systems teetering on the brink of massive change. The former vice president of NAEYC, Ida Rose was an invited expert at an Obama administration White House event that was focused on education and a keynoter for the Asian Preschool Education Annual Conference, the largest gathering of early educators in the world. She has presented to such luminaries as the governor of Shanghai and the California state legislature. Over the last decade and change, Ida Rose led statewide education initiatives in Arizona and California and was a National Science Foundation principal investigator. She served as an early education assessment subject matter expert with the U.S. National Governors Association and is frequently a grant reviewer for the National Science Foundation. Dr. Florez serves on the board of the Human Systems Dynamics Institute in Minneapolis, where she's also a certified professional, and she holds a Ph.D. in educational psychology from the University of Arizona. Dr. Florez's work has been published from parenting magazines to peer-reviewed academic journals, as well as Columbia University's Teachers College Record and the UCLA Civil Rights Project. She has served as faculty at Penn State University College of Medicine, University of Arizona College of Education, Northern Arizona University College of Education, and Arizona State University Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College. In 2017, she founded a consulting practice serving U.S. and international clients. Ida Rose is also an Arizona master gardener and is close to finishing her home with her husband, an off-grid sustainable living demonstration site that includes a passive solar home and greenhouse, on-site water recycling, and a 35,000-gallon rainwater harvesting system. It's very cool. I will share how you can connect with her and get your own copy of her book in the chat. AJ.
Impressive, right? Yeah. Ida Rose, I'm going to ask you 3 questions that you probably haven't had me ask you in a little minute. And I think you know what they are.
So.
For whom did you write this book?
I wrote this book for people who know that there is something profoundly off about our current educational systems and who long for a whole new way of doing school, but may not know what that could look like or how to make it happen.
And what is your core message?
I invite readers to think differently about education, to question the mechanistic ways we do school, and to embrace instead a complex, regenerative way to educate humans of any age.
And what is your promise to readers?
That by the end of the book, they'll have the knowledge and a working framework that they can use to create vibrant schools for the complex times that we're living in.
Love, 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 love. So we're going to ask you to read some excerpts and set them up. How many excerpts are you reading today?
I'm reading 3.
3. Okay. I also have questions, so we'll see if we can get to everything. Before
right.
we start, I want to point something out. Laura will be putting in the chat links to purchase Ida Rose's book. This is my ask of you. Thank you, Joey, for getting a copy. I see that in the chat already. I would love for you, if it fits your budget, to please pick up a copy of this book. Laura's sharing the link. You can choose, if you don't want to do Amazon, you can choose another retailer like welovebookshop.org, because that gives money back to indie booksellers. What I also really want you to do is leave a review. As we go through tonight, you're going to see a bunch of people, our regulars here, and alums, putting comments in the chat of things that resonate with us, phrases we like, things that we feel are very interesting that we want to remember. If you do that, you will have enough to go do an Amazon review for Ida Rose. You could just say, this is my favorite line. I loved when I learned this, and that would be enough. And if you wanted to amend it later, you could. Why am I pushing this? Because Amazon reviews help authors sell more books, and it's very hard to get them. So let's see if we can rally the troops. Ida Rose, please set up the excerpt.
Okay, so this first excerpt is from chapter 1. And in chapter 1, I talk through a couple of experiences that led me to really question everything that I had been believing about education. And the first one is just a description of an experience I had at Punanalea o Maui, which is a Hawaiian cultural preschool on Maui. And then the second one, which is what I'm going to read, was a plane ride home when I was serving on the NAEYC board, a plane ride home from Pittsburgh, when I came to the inescapable conclusion that I really needed to challenge everything I believed about what schooling is.
Great. I'll let you get started.
Okay, this section starts off with, new thinking makes us squirm. I shifted my weight and lifted my gaze from my iPad to the fluffy blanket of pink clouds out of my window. I was only 45 minutes into a 4-hour flight home from Pittsburgh to San Diego, and it already felt like hours. I stretched my neck and squirmed. 2 thoughts kept rolling around in front of mine like a used car dealership jingle I just couldn't shake. Creators of technology, not just consumers. Wage peace, not war. I was serving my second year as board vice president of the National Association for the Education of Young Children. Flying home from our retreat in Pittsburgh, I wanted to jot down some notes so I could remember details about the community-based early learning programs we had visited, but I was distracted. I kept thinking about what it meant to wage peace, not war, and what it meant for children to be creators of technology, not merely consumers. I blamed Dr. Ilan Norbosch for the distraction. A world-renowned Carnegie Mellon University professor of robotics, Ilan spoke at our retreat's opening dinner. He told us about an app his students had created. When I think of computer science majors studying under one of the world's top roboticists, I don't picture them perched on child-sized chairs, observing all the minute goings-on among 3-year-old kids. But that's exactly what Ilan's students did. They weren't looking to create teaching tricks or ideas for how software programs could train children to count or name colors. They were looking for ways preschoolers could use technology to support their own learning. The app they created, Message from Me, fits the bill. When children want to share something they've seen or created at school, they use an iPad mini to take a video or pictures to text to loved ones. A child might text their mom pictures of their block creations or show Nona a worm in the school garden, or maybe introduce their brother to the class guinea pig. Teachers encourage children to narrate their pictures and video. Children love the app. Generating content that links home and school helps children focus on their experiences and practice language skills while creating opportunities for parents and teachers to support children's learning. There's so much to love about Message from Me. Still, I squirmed. Children as creators, not merely consumers? What a profound idea. I loved it. Well, I sort of loved it. What did it mean for my work? At the time, I was the executive director of the Elementary Institute of Science in southeastern San Diego. I was passionate about the children in our predominantly working class immigrant community, getting their hands on the same technology as their affluent peers. We ran coding workshops, and I was working on starting a project to teach preschoolers beginning robotics. Still, I had to admit, when technology is in the hands of children, they're almost always responders, not creators. Most educational apps capture children's attention with intense animation, then drill for memorization of isolated facts. Kids might create an avatar from a short menu of options, but rarely does technology truly empower children to be agents of their own learning. I was also a bit, admittedly, self-righteously annoyed. I was, after all, doing a heck of a lot more than what I saw others doing when it came to young children's equitable access to technology. Was it really my responsibility to ensure they were creators too? I couldn't escape the notion that it was. This dilemma alone would have kept me squirming all the way home, but I was even more nettled by the way Elah had started his presentation. It landed hard in my belly when he said it, and it still bugged me on the plane ride home. I use technology to wage peace, not war. What in the world did that mean? I had sometimes questioned the ethics of certain uses of military technology, but hadn't given it deep consideration. I lived in San Diego. I was born there. San Diego is known for sunny beaches, surfers, and sailboats, but essentially San Diego is a military town. My father was deployed from San Diego to the Pacific in World War II, and he wasted no time moving there from his hometown of Chicago after the war. He worked for, and was laid off by, nearly every defense contractor in the city. He's buried at Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery on the Point Loma Peninsula, overlooking North Island Naval Air Station on Coronado. I grew up 6 miles south of Miramar, the military base made famous by Tom Cruise in the movie Top Gun, and I know all the best spots to watch the annual Blue Angel show. I grew up assuming that keeping the peace is the morally justifiable purpose of superior military might, to so intimidate bad actors that they would never even consider picking a fight. But after 9/11, and with the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan dragging infinitely on and costing so many lives, traumatizing service personnel in ways that would never heal, ripping apart families, and devouring obscene amounts of money, I had begun to wonder if we had lost our way, or if insisting on military superiority was even ethical to begin with. I couldn't shake Elah's remark. What does it even mean to wage peace? And what does technology have to do with it? These were new and uncomfortable questions for me. I shifted my weight again, trying not to elbow the person in the middle seat, and looked back at my iPad. I decided to contemplate the whole waging peace thing later, and opened an essay on paradigms written by the late biologist and systems thinker, Dr. Donella Meadows. I thought reading would distract me from my discomfort. But instead, I squirmed even more. I read, quote, "The shared ideas in the minds of society, the great big unstated assumptions, unstated because they're unnecessary to state, everyone already knows them, constitute that society's paradigm, or deepest set of beliefs about how the world works. There's a difference between nouns and verbs. Money measures something real and has real meaning. Therefore, people who are paid less are literally worth less. Growth is good. Nature is a stock of resources to be converted to human purposes. One can own land. Those are just a few of the paradigmatic assumptions of our current culture, all of which have utterly dumbfounded other cultures who thought them not the least bit obvious. End quote. I stopped cold. No. Of course, nature isn't a stock of resources to be converted for human purposes, but of course you can own land. I did own land. I had the paper to prove it. I read the blog again. Of course, money measures something and has real meaning. For one thing, it measures whether or not I can own land, right? I wanted to argue more, but the Allah-sized lump in my gut tightened. I took a deep, focused breath. Maybe my own unquestioned assumptions were keeping me from seeing how peace and creativity were related. Maybe things I accepted as obvious truths, like the right to own land, were merely fabrications of the culture in which I was raised. I felt caught in my own contradiction. Wasn't the belief that I could own land inextricably connected, excuse me, to seeing nature as a resource that I had a right to convert for my own purposes? Was there some connection between the right to own land and the necessity of military superiority? Might there be a connection between children consuming technology rather than being empowered by it, and schools being so rigid they cannot adapt? I sensed there was a bigger why that wove these threads together, and that the why had a lot to do with how to move education to a better place. I also sensed the why and the how mattered very much. I spent the next 9 years studying why and contemplating how. I share what I learned in this book.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. It's so delicious and good. That is expert level weaving. That is, dang, that is a masterclass in holding space for all these different thoughts, but with the central conflict remaining there. And then, oh, that last line, the last two lines. Come on. Come on. That is good. I gotta ask you a question that I think this is something that's I've been wanting to do at Monday Night Reading since you started working on this book. So early on in our work together, one of the first times you blew my mind, and there was many, but one of the first times was I was reading a teaching point in an early draft, and you wrote that our education system works as it is intended to work. And I remember thinking when you came into workshop, oh, she's going to talk about a better way to do education. But then you said, no, education works exactly as it's supposed to work. It's hitting the mark. Can you please explain to everyone what you mean by that? Because that was my first paradigm shift.
That's when you went, huh?
Yeah.
Yes. So education as we know it is wildly successful at what it was originally intended to do, which was to create a workforce educated just enough and no more, just enough to keep industrial capitalism working. I mean, literally, that's it. You can look at the history of education. You can in the United States, but also around the world and in many other places. How we do school now was it grew up alongside the Industrial Revolution, and there were two needs. There was the need for people to be able to follow directions. There was a need for a minimal level of literacy, and to be able to throw switches and to be able to follow directions. And then which will happen in, I guess, yes, in the second reading, where I talk about there needed to be separation. So there needed to be separation between parents and kids so that parents could go to work and fill the workforce pipeline.
Yeah, so that blew my mind, but that was only the beginning. I mean, I feel like I got a real education from you, and I know that's considering what we're talking about, that seems odd to say, but I'm smarter because I learned from you. And I think differently because I learned from you. I would love for you to help everyone here understand how you define regenerative learning.
So actually, that's going to be my last reading. So,
Okay, well, maybe you have just a little, tell me why it's in the subtitle. Regenerative learning for complex times.
right. So regenerative learning is, let's just think about regeneration in general. That term is originally applied to agriculture. We've kind of done the same thing with our earth, the soil, as we have done to education and the humans that are in our educational systems. And so we have soil that isn't fertile. There's getting a little sidetracked, but Kiss the Ground. You should watch that documentary if anything I'm saying interests you. But so the idea of regeneration is to be generative in a way that makes what we've lost alive again. And so there are ways of teaching and learning. And in the first part of the first chapter, I tell the story about visiting Punana Maui because they regenerated their Hawaiian traditions of how they taught and how children were taught historically, and they regenerated that. So the other issue about regenerative models, whether they're about agriculture or about business, there's a great book about regeneration in business or in education. I just totally lost my train of thought. It just went. The really important thing is that it is based on a complexity science way of looking at the world and thinking about the world. And what we have all been taught in schools and taught how to think is a complicated mechanistic way of looking at the world. So the idea that we would be regenerating the complex ways that we as humans all of us used to think in complex ways. And we need to regenerate that in our educational system if we're ever going to live in a vibrant, thriving planet in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really wanted you to say that in the way that only you can. Do you want to set up the next excerpt?
Okay, so this excerpt is from chapter 3, which is the chapter in which I explore one of the most important concepts in the book, which is this difference between complication or mechanistic thinking and complexity. And it's actually one of the reasons I wrote this book, because I started speaking about the difference between complexity and complication. And I got feedback from people that came to my workshops and they would say, that was really great. This is really profound. I need to understand this. I'm walking away really not knowing what you said. And it was because they are challenging ideas. I mean, we are talking about paradigm shifts. And in order for us to learn, we have to be able to let the ideas sink in and to start noticing the differences between complexity and complication on our own. So this is
Do you remember that this was for me? This was the one that I was trying so hard to understand.
I do remember that.
Yeah, I feel like wait, are they the same? Complicated and complex, and what's happening to my brain? But I think they were good conversations because you in those conversations found ways to break things down for the rest of us. And you did it so beautifully. So I'm excited for this excerpt.
All right. So this is from a section that leads off with the drill is caught, not taught. Mass public education grew up alongside industrialization because industrial capitalism needed it. Industrialization needed the general populace to think in ways that made them good line workers. Manufacturers needed workers to be dependent on others for their living, willingly compliant with working conditions decided by someone else who held more power. Employers needed human cogs in an industrial machine that hadn't yet figured out how to automatize the functions people performed. The primary purpose of schools was to create enough people who knew and followed the drill, the how to think. Schools are often criticized for only teaching kids what to think, not how to think. That's a dangerous misconception. Schools use what to think to teach how to think, not the other way around. Training people how to think is the primary purpose of schools. The how to think is baked into the complicated structure of each school day. In Chapter 2, I touched on the role mental models play in translating paradigmatic assumptions into daily life. Nowhere is this truer than in schools. The drill is a collection of mental models that school children encounter day after day after day for years. Two of the most powerful types of mental models, scripts and scenes, significantly influence how we think because they organize our lives into stories, and stories are perhaps the most powerful way humans learn and form memories. They are the non-conscious way we learn how to think so we can function as expected in our society. Scripts are action sequences. Scenes are the ways people and things are present in a space where the scripts happen. Scripts and scenes are so embedded in daily life, we learn to act automatically in alignment with them without needing to be explicitly taught. When I walk into a fast food restaurant, I decide to eat while I'm waiting, what I want to eat while waiting in line. I order at the counter when it's my turn, pay, wait for my order, then eat. The scene and the scripts are entirely different in a fine dining restaurant. Fancy restaurants don't have a counter with teenage cashiers sporting paper hats. Scenes convey important information about what script people will use in all sorts of situations. When you walk into a meeting room with chairs positioned around small tables covered in large newsprint and scattered with markers, you know people will behave much differently than if you walk into a room set with chairs in rows facing a podium. No one needs to teach you how to behave in these situations. The way the environment is set up prompts you to act in certain ways. Separating, sorting, and sequencing. Schools immerse children every day in a set of specialized scripts and scenes that non-consciously communicate the patterns and mental models of the prevailing machine paradigm. These scripts and scenes are repeated day after day, year after year, seeping deeply into the non-conscious depths of young minds and profoundly influencing how they think and act. Three mental models in particular, separating, sorting, and sequencing, do a powerful job teaching how to think in ways aligned with the machine paradigm without spending a penny on curriculum. Schools begin separating even before children set foot in kindergarten. Each spring and over the summer, school districts round up preschool children, so school personnel, I did this thousands of times, can assess them and separate those who are ready for school from those who are not. During kindergarten roundup, parents and children go to different areas to see how they, both children and adults, will react to being separated. Starting school separation continues. For many children, preschool or kindergarten is the first time they're separated from their families and home on a daily basis. Children are separated in schools from their siblings and often from neighbors and extended family members. Other than 1 year of middle school choir, my twins were never in the same public school class. The scripts and scenes of separation, saying goodbye to young children when dropping them off at school, are an unquestioned, just the way things are assumption that has emerged from industrialized capitalism. For parents to fill the workforce pipeline, they've got to separate from their children. The younger, the better. Rarely does anyone question if separating young children from family members is beneficial or even necessary. The prevailing paradigm's mental model of separation have so saturated our society that daily separation at age 5 or younger is assumed to be a normal part of growing up. Yet for millennia, humans have lived and learned in extended families, spending their days with those they're related to. In school, children are not only separated from family, they're also separated from adults in curious ways. For example, At home or in public, say at a restaurant or a park, do children use a different bathroom than adults? Do they eat separately from adults? Not typically, but in school they do. Separating children from adults is a key mental model of the prevailing paradigm. Kids go to school, parents go to work, separation keeps the system going. Sorting is a special case of separation. People are sorted in all sorts of ways in schools. Children are sorted into grade levels according to age and within classes by supposed ability. People in schools are sorted by who stewards knowledge and who does not. Educators hold and dispense knowledge. Children receive it. Non-professionals clean, manage, cook, and drive, but they're not stewards of knowledge. Children learn these distinctions early on. Once I was testing a 6-year-old for a district's gifted program. Early in the test, I posed a practice question that asked how 2 things were similar. The child looked at me quizzically and asked, "Don't you know?" "Why are you asking me?" "I'm a kid. You're supposed to tell me." People are not the only things sorted in schools. Knowledge, and in the early years especially, development, are sorted too. Knowledge is sorted into math, reading, and if a school is well-resourced, science and maybe music. Development is sorted into cognitive, language, social, emotional, and physical. When I encounter the slicing and dicing of development, I always find my forehead planted in my palm. Human development simply does not work that way. Just as there's no aspect of development that isn't physical, there's no aspect of development that isn't cognitive. There isn't a single emotion that's not physiologically induced or that has no physiological consequence. There isn't a single emotion the brain does not regulate or respond to. Even so, every single US state has a set of early learning standards that sort development into these contrived domains. Sorting knowledge in discrete categories allows it to be easily sequenced into years, with a curriculum year sequenced from a starting to an ending point. Curriculum is traditionally defined as scope, the content to be taught, and sequence, the order in which it's taught. Curricula is further separated, sorted, and sequenced into weekly or monthly themes or topics. Teachers follow regular pacing calendars or schedules to make sure they align the sorted curriculum into the appropriately sorted timeframes. To learn the sorted and sequenced information, grades are sequenced from lower to upper, with children promoting year by year as they move through the curriculum. Equally profound, and given what we know about human learning, even more baffling, time is sorted into learning and non-learning segments, such as recess, passing periods, and lunch. Sorting time allows governments to hold schools accountable for instructional time. This is simply not the way human learning works. I can't emphasize this enough. There is nothing in anecdotal or scientific evidence that even hints that this is the way humans actually learn. Nothing. Pause for a moment and consider that everything children and youth need to learn during their growing up years can be accomplished without any of the separating, sorting, or sequencing that occurs every day in schools as we know them. We could argue that these operations are designed for crowd control or for fairness. But the truth is, not only are these operational mechanisms not needed for humans to learn, they are counterproductive.
You gotta download this chat later because it's just on fire, Ida Rose, with so many people responding. You're blowing their minds. You're blowing their minds just over and over and over. There's so many huge ahas in that last excerpt alone. So I have to ask you, I know we want to do this third excerpt, but I wanted to ask you another couple of questions.
Okay.
I'm gonna skip to one that I really want to anchor this in action because I'm wondering, we're gonna read this book and you're gonna blow our minds. And we're gonna have to put it down and pick it back up, and you're gonna blow our minds, and we're gonna tell people about it. But aside from telling people about it, aside from gifting it to others and making sure our libraries and schools have them, what is an action step that you want us to take? when you have blown our minds wide open, what should we do?
I think the most important thing that people can do at this point in time is to look around and to find others who are thinking similarly and form pockets of learning. And I emphasize, now I'm reading from the first part of the book. The middle part of the book is a really practical section. It not only gives a framework that called adaptive action that was developed by Dr. Glenda Oyoung at the Human Systems Dynamics Institute in Minneapolis. But so it gives that framework. But and I did that because I wanted people to have a practical way. Like, what do you do with this? But I also emphasize you don't need to start what we all are thinking as a school. There are opportunities. I mean, right now, according to my definition in chapter 1, this is a school. So, and last Saturday, there were a bunch of us right down the street from us that gathered to order seeds together. And, you know, we were looking at seeds and we're looking at all the seed catalogs. And then we were saying, okay, what grows for you? How did you keep the grasshoppers away from your crop? It was a school. And if we kind of blow open that definition of school, that it isn't just the elementary school down the street, it isn't just the high school or the university, you know, that it's any place set aside where people are learning either together or individually. It's a school. When we start thinking about it in that way, then it opens up all kinds of opportunities for people to gather together intergenerationally, cross age, and we start to see that there's opportunities to be able to create regenerative schools right in our own local communities.
I love that. I want to give you a chance to do this next excerpt, and then I have a couple of follow-up questions. I want to encourage everybody, please pick up a copy of the book. If it fits your budget, gift it to someone you know. If you did buy a copy today, thank you to everyone who's posting in the chat. If you haven't yet, share it in the chat. And if I could just get you to leave an Amazon review. Honestly, if you could just stay online for 5 minutes after we close today and just leave a review for Ida Rose, even if you haven't read it yet, you've heard enough that you could say something that you've learned. And by the way, you might not know, you can go back and edit those reviews. So if you decide that you were blown away in 900 other ways and you need to talk about all of them later, you can. And I'm going to do something that I've never ever done in Monday Night Reading history, is I'm going to stay on for 5 to 10 minutes after 7 for everyone who's going to sit here and write a review, and we can do it together and see how many of us can get some reviews for Ida Rose tonight. So if you're willing to stay, I can show you how it's so quick, y'all. You can do it. All right, I had to do my plug, Ida Rose.
Thank you so much. It means the world.
It is so hard to get these reviews, you guys. It is so hard. You could ask 100 people and get 5. And it's not that the other 95 are in anything but lovely. It's just people forget. And so that's why this is a good opportunity. So I hope you will stick around. Ida Rose, set up the next excerpt, please.
Okay, so this excerpt is from chapter 5, which I guess actually is in part 2. You know, one of the saddest things about all of us being immersed in mechanistic ways of thinking is that most of us have lost the essential human ability to be able to think in wholes. So we hear a lot about holistic education, and especially in early childhood, you know, we talk about the whole child, you know, and then we turn around and we slice and dice the children and the curriculum into parts and pieces. So we're kind of just stuck not being able to think in these complex ways. So this chapter is called Regenerative Life and Learning, and it leads off with a quote from one French philosopher, and then I transition to another French philosopher that kind of think completely differently from each other. So So it starts with a quote by Dr. Edgar Morin, who is a French educational philosopher. He's now over 100 years old, but he wrote a report to the UN on the future of education. And this is a quote from that report. The education of the future is faced with a universal problem because our compartmentalized, piecemeal, disjointed learning is deeply, drastically inadequate to grasp realities and problems which are ever more global, transnational, multidimensional, transversal, polydisciplinary, and planetary. Complicated thinking is rooted in the work of French philosopher and mathematician René Descartes, the founder of analytical geometry. Descartes famously said, "I think, therefore I am." His work has had profound and lasting impact on how we think and therefore are. Dr. Peter Checklin, professor emeritus of systems thinking at Lancaster University, writes, René Descartes taught Western civilization that the thing to do with complexity was to break it up into component parts and tackle them separately. The lesson has been well learned, and the idea is deeply embodied in anyone who has a Western-style education. The Cartesian legacy provides us with an unnoticed framework, a set of intellectual pigeonholes into which we place new knowledge we acquire. The unnoticed pigeonholing of knowledge is core to mechanistic thinking. It means everyone raised in a Western society has been taught that slicing and dicing our complex humanity and compartmentalizing our infinitely complex world into bite-sized concepts is just the way things are. Philosopher Dr. Mary Midgley points to the heart of the problem, saying that this mechanistic way of thinking is so automatic that people scarcely notice it, let alone criticize it or see it as dangerous. She's talking about you and me. We scarcely notice the slicing and dicing, let alone criticize it or see it as dangerous. If we or our descendants are ever to find humanity thriving on a renewed and flourishing planet, we need schools that foster regenerative values and mindsets. Throughout the remainder of this book, I use the term regenerative to refer to a complex worldview that I and many others see as a potential life-honoring emerging paradigm. At its core, our regenerative paradigm prioritizes mutual well-being for all. It sees everyone and everything as part of a connected whole, a whole new way. Regenerative learning invites us and our children to understand that we are surrounded by complex phenomena that are more than and other than the sum of their parts. How is that possible? How can something be more than and other than the sum of its parts? And why is that possibility important? It's important because the things that really matter, such as the planet and the creatures that live on it and all natural phenomena, including humans, including our children, can only be understood as whole phenomena. The machine paradigm has obscured our understanding of this uniqueness, beauty, and power of whole phenomena. If the slicing and dicing of human development and learning is at the core of what's wrong with our current education system, and I would argue, and boy, I just can't believe I'm reading this sentence right now. Okay. And I would argue our economic, monetary, and political systems as well, then we've got to buckle up and learn to think in wholes. Thinking in wholes helps us to understand that complex systems are not only more than, but also something other than the sum of their parts. Children are other than the sum of their parts. Learning is other than the sum of its parts. When something is other than the sum of its parts, we cannot adequately understand it by analyzing its pieces. If you're wondering how in the world you can understand complex phenomena if we can't analyze the parts, Einstein, who I quote in a previous chapter, had an answer. Learn to think in a whole new way. Those three words, whole, new, and way, are more than cliche. The defining characteristic of complexity is that it generates new wholes that are something other than the sum of the parts. They are key to noticing and rejecting complicated pigeonholing of things that cannot be properly understood when sliced and diced. If we are truly committed to educating future generations in ways that honor their humanity and prepares them to live in harmony with each other on a thriving planet, we need to do everything we can to shift from thinking in parts and pieces to thinking in wholes. Wholeness. Humans are whole phenomena. Every cell in our bodies carries our unique DNA, and yet you will not find the whole of who I am in any individual cell. I don't exist in my parts. You cannot find me in my spleen. My brain does not make me me. My heart doesn't either. I am more than and other than both or either. You cannot add up my parts and find me. I cannot add up your parts and find you. The me that is me can only be found emerging from the relationships of the parts, not in the parts nor the sum of them. The same is true for you. The idea of seeing and understanding things as whole might be hard to wrap our heads around, but this way of thinking has not only been around for as long as humans have walked the earth, but we're surrounded by it every day. Complexity thinking gives us ways of understanding patterns of wholeness and newness that complicated ways of thinking just can't. If we want a whole new regenerative way of doing school to emerge, we need a whole slew of people who understand simple rules, self-organizing, and emergence. These ideas are inextricably connected, so it's best to describe them together. Self-organizing happens when individuals start following the same set of simple rules. Simple rules are not merely rules that are easy to understand or follow, like stopping at a stop sign. Simple rules are a complex phenomenon that coordinate individuals' behavior into complex interactions that become a new thing. This next sentence is really important for our times. Think about how you often wished for a way for individual people to act collectively so something new and powerful and beautiful could emerge. This is the process that leads to that outcome. When enough individuals start following the same simple rules, they self-organize. No design team, state-approved curriculum, or engineering plans required. They organize themselves, and if there are enough individuals and energy, a whole new thing emerges. This complex phenomenon happens around us all the time. It's the way the complex world works. No one designs COVID variants. No one needs to. They emerge as the virus self-organizes and reorganizes. I'm going to skip a little bit to describing this in education. I describe wetness and depth perception. You'll have to read chapter 5. Let's step away from the sink where we're washing our hands and go outside to see self-organized learning in action. Do you remember learning to ride a bike? I do. I had a sparkly royal blue Schwinn with a white basket and handlebar tassels. Learning to ride was a big deal. My dad told me I could ride with him outside our neighborhood once I could handle my bike well on my own. I remember how disappointed I was at first when I couldn't keep both feet on the pedals. I had no awareness of the complex processes at play, but I knew my dad was there to hold the seat and help me steer until it finally all clicked. What seems like an ordinary part of growing up is a massively complex exercise in self-organizing. When I learned to ride a bike, internal processes such as my sense of balance, desire to adventure with my dad, and coordination of muscle movement interacted with external sensations, the feel of my feet on the pedals, the sight of my fingers gripping the handlebar, the movement of air over my skin, the sound of the tires on the pavement. When vision and balance, muscles and motivation all synced up to keep me and my sparkly bike upright and moving forward, that emergent property we call riding a bike happened because my neurons began to fire in a whole new organized way. Bike riding, like the other examples that I just gave that I didn't read to you, emerges as a whole phenomenon. Just as our brains form a whole image from both eyes, bike riding requires the rider to experience and sync up the relationships of all the moving parts. Bike riding emerges whole. You can't learn to ride a bike from experiencing just the parts. You cannot learn to ride a bike from pedaling an exercise bike or riding a pedicab. There's no way to learn to ride a bike without riding a bike. When we see learning in this whole new way, everything changes. We can't help but see that we need a whole new way of doing school.
I have to just say, we're all transfixed, but to everybody here who just bought copies or is going to buy a copy, we didn't get a ton of story from Ida Rose, but oh my gosh, the stories just I haven't had a chance to get through. Is the Girl Scout story still in here?
Oh, of course. Yes, it is. That's chapter 2.
The storytelling is gorgeous. It's gorgeous. So we didn't get a full taste of that, but I just want to say, if you thought you were transfixed by what you just heard, which is quite a feat, can I say, Ida Rose? Because you're explaining complicated things, and there's a lot of teaching points, and there's a lot of nuance, and we have to carry multiple things and wait for you to thread the needle, and we did, and you do, and you're just ace at this. You're just ace at this. But there's stories in here. They're gonna blow your mind, everybody.
I knew you would be disappointed if I didn't read the Girl Scout story, but I've already read the Girl Scout story in a Monday night reading. And so
that's true. I forgot. Yeah, when it's a work in progress, which you can all watch on YouTube, by the way. But you can also just read it in the book since you bought it. All right, Ida Rose, I'm absolutely thrilled. And you got me thinking about what happens to not top 3 students. That beginning is hard to conceptualize. How do you organize teaching with story, with research and sequence, all of that, and how does that all work? And we just do it together. And by the end, everyone knows. And maybe you still need some advice about fine-tuning it, but it's more in you understand it, so you can see, oh yes, that goes there. And anyway, it's so good when a book gets you thinking about your own experience, because then that's how we understand, right?
Yes.
So I have a very important question to ask you, but before I do that, a reminder that I am sticking around. So we're going to turn off the recording when we say thank you, Ida Rose, and all of that. And then those who stay here, I will walk you through doing a review. I'm not going to tell you what to write, but we'll give you the link and we'll show you how to do it. And we can all try and get some reviews for Ida Rose. 2 questions. What was surprising about your author journey, Ida Rose?
So you gave me a heads up about this one. And so I've really been thinking about it. And I've hesitated because I'm like, don't want to seem like I'm a kiss up here. But here's what really surprised me was how over the top, incredibly valuable this community of authors has been. Just the knowing that I can dip into a writing sprint when I need to, knowing that I can get, great advice from you, AJ, and from Laura, knowing that I'm going to get great cheerleading. I mean, I've written a lot, academically and in other aspects of my life, but this was really different. And what you just described, being able to write about really complex ideas in a way that a general audience, a person can pick it up and not only understand it, but want to read it. That it was huge. It was very, very hard. It's probably, other than carrying twins to term, this was probably the hardest thing that I have done, especially in my professional life. So I was surprised at how valuable and how necessary it was to be part of this incredible community.
I love them. We're here for all of it as the book finds its readers, and as you want to expand that. Yeah, we're here for all of it. And my last question of the night It's my favorite question to ask, and I only ask it when you're in Monday night reading, and that is, what is the change you want to see in the world? Because your book exists in it now.
Yes. I really want to see us redefine what it means, what school means, what education means. Even if we can just start at redefining it so we can open it up so that it's not cookie cutter schools that everyone has to fit in. I cut this part out of the manuscript, but I flew back and forth from Arizona or San Diego to DC in about a 10-year period of time, about 3 dozen times, and landed at DCA. So yeah, that's been definitely scary and triggering, that accident. And I would get bored. It was a long flight. And so what I started to do was I play this game. I'd look out the window and I would try to figure out, is it an element? I would overpopulated areas. I would try to pick out the elementary schools, the middle schools, and the high schools. And you know what? I got really good at it. And I think that's really scary. That just, from 30,000 foot, you can look down and go, yep, that's an elementary school. There's no parking lot and there's a playground. And it doesn't matter where you're flying over. That's the way that it is. And I would love to see that change. I would love for there to be far more flexibility. And I would love for us to actually educate humans, young and at every age, in the way that people actually learn.
Yay. We're so proud of you, Ida Rose, and it's just the beginning, getting the book out into the world. Thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you, everybody, for coming out for Ida Rose tonight. Our next Monday night reading is on March 3rd.